My name is Josephine Akia Luyimbazi. I'm the country coordinator for participatory ecological land use management, PELUM Uganda. It's very critical for AFSA to advocate for My Food is African campaign. This campaign is timely. And why I'm saying it's timely, over the time, our great-great-grandfathers used to feed on rich indigenous African foods. But because of the era of colonialism that introduced large-scale plantations as a way of having labor, Africans do labor on these farms, we lost our diversity in terms of our African foods. And increasingly, we are having corporate capture of our African foods. We see more of the European and Western cultures being adopted within our African setting. For instance, the youth find it very stylish, very classy to eat fast foods compared to eating traditional foods. And yet the nutritional value of these fast foods is highly questionable. We also having scenarios where there's an increase in non-communicable diseases and other lifestyle diseases, cancers, which are all attributed to the food that we eat. COVID-19 proved us that you have to build your immunity. You have to boost your immunity for you to be able to fight the virus. And we all went back to adopting our indigenous and African foods. So AFSA is coming in to advocate for My Food is African is right on time. We need to revamp our African heritage. In Africa, food is our culture. Food is our identity. Food defines me as Josephine and defines my entire generation as well. So it's very critical because we need to have that unified voice. We need to mobilize as many citizens, as many Africans, as many Ugandans to rally behind this campaign so that we have our own African food policy passed by the African Union that will clearly depict our own heritage, our food sovereignty, our identity, and so shall we be able to have our own right to African food. In Uganda, we are one of the countries that is implementing the campaign in collaboration with AFSA, and we have a set of activities that we have been able to implement. We started with the inception meeting, where we targeted different policymakers within the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, but also those in trade and also those in the Ministry of Health to pick their thoughts on the way they are going to support us in ensuring that Uganda has an adequate and very elaborate Ugandan food policy. We then had the launch that was graced by the presence of honorable ministers from trade, but also the minister, the representative of the minister, a commissioner from the Ministry of Agriculture, and also had AFSA represented, and other academia was also represented. And why we did the launch is to create that popular awareness that this is the time for us to begin the campaign in Uganda. To have this campaign widely publicized, we were able to train 25 media personalities. The intention of training the media personalities is, one, to inform them of the campaign and the relevancy of the campaign as regards to the objectives that we intend to achieve. And then also clearly show them that the media is considered in Uganda the third estate. So they demand a lot of power and because of the information that they share with the public. So we had to train them as a way of informing them, but also giving them the necessary information and knowledge that they need on the Food is African campaign, looking at the Ugandan context. But we are looking at promoting indigenous and traditional foods. And right now, PELUM Uganda is promoting agroecology as a sustainable farming system. So this required us to also be able to train them on key concepts and principles on agroecology for them to be able to report the right content that we desire. We've gone ahead and had dialogues with representatives from the Parliamentary Committee on Agriculture and Budget, and also Food Security and Health. And why we engage these is to garner their support in terms of advocating for the Ugandan food policy, but also to ensure that we attain the 10% Maputo Declaration which basically talks about the national budget allocating 10% to the agriculture sector. And we believe in there we shall have different budget votes that are contributing to the growth and promotion of agroecology, where the indigenous and traditional foods will be promoted as in a way. So these are some of the activities that we've done. We've also done a video documentary showing the preparation of indigenous foods within the northern area and the eastern area. They have traditional food species, which they call wild species because they grow on their own. A variety of amaranthus that is widely grown and you don't have to do anything, but prepared in a very rich and preservative way that the nutritional value will not be distracted in any way. Right now, what I can say to our governments, and I'll begin with the government of Uganda, we are very happy that the President of Uganda, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, was not able to consent to passing of the National Genetically Engineering Bill. And why he did so is because it affects the food sovereignty of the country. And some of the issues he raised that needed to be addressed are issues of safety, issues of rights of the farmers, issues of the environmental, health, and labeling of the GMO products. And this gives us quite a milestone for us to continue advocating and stay and conserve our own indigenous heritage. We also have the National Organic Agriculture Policy, which was passed in September 2019. Unfortunately, it does not have an act, a legislation to ensure that it's implemented. So my plea would be for the government of Uganda to allocate resources towards the development of the National Organic Agriculture Bill that will give a leeway and legislation on how organic agriculture foods can be produced, because we all know these are produced without synthetic chemicals, and for that reason they are safe and have the nutritional value that the indigenous foods will also have. As PELUM Uganda, we are also developing the National Agroecology Strategy. We are fronting agroecology because it's a system. It's a movement that rallies behind all the other social enterprises and all the other ecosystems, and it brings in the relationships between the planet, the earth, the environment, the plants, and the animals. So we believe that we need to have that kind of peaceful coexistence between these different ecosystems for us to harness our indigenous heritage, food being one of them. So we believe this will be one that will address issues around climate change, issues around food insecurity, issues around unsustainable food production, and the loss of biodiversity. The other that I would rally behind the government of Uganda is to pass the national food policy. This is what will ensure that Uganda's sovereignty, Uganda's an identity, Uganda's cultural heritage is conserved. We value food because our grandparents valued food. When you look at food and you're eating the African food, it gives you an experience. And each of these foods has a story behind it. Right from the harvesting to the preparation, there's something special about that food. So we wouldn't want to miss that and trade it for chips and chicken that we eat over all these kind of food companies that are being adopted from the Western world. To our colleagues in the African government or at the Pan-African level, and so is the East African community level where Uganda is, there's need for us to stand firm and have our own African food policy. If we continue opening our doors in the name of trade, in the name of imperialism and neo-colonialism, we are most likely to sell ourselves and have nothing left in terms of our identity. I think the time is now for us to have an African food policy that depicts who we are, that talks to our values, that talks to our rich diversity from the Western, Southern, Northern Africa. We have a lot to share. Everywhere you go, there will be a special food in each of the African countries. That may not be the same for our counterparts in the Western and the Northern. So we need to be able to define ourselves as Africans and stand to that. And the only way we can do that is by having an African food policy. To our friends in the West, we love partnerships. We love learning from them, and I believe they also learn a lot from us because most of the organic foods that they eat are all from the African continent. it will be a huge disservice for them to hamper the hands that are actually feeding them. The best way to do is how can they support us in terms of financial support, in terms of collaboration, and ensuring that Africans are empowered. Africans are put on the table to discuss for themselves and design mechanisms that best suit African modalities and not the Western context.